Today's video is brought to you by the best language learning app in the world, Babbel. A few months ago, I started learning Dutch using Babbel, and it's been a ton of fun. Babbel has a bunch of different languages you can learn, but I wanted to surprise my Dutch relatives by talking to them in their native tongue. Babbel's lessons are only a few minutes long, so I like doing them every morning when I'm making my coffee. But the thing is, the lessons are really engaging, so I often find myself doing several lessons every morning. It's not surprising to me at all that Babbel is the #1 language learning app in the world with more than 10 million subscriptions worldwide. It may be a while before I can travel to the Netherlands to use my new language skills, but I'm really enjoying the learning process. It's a nice break from the day, and it's improving my cognitive functions and memory. Ik moet gewoon slimmer omdat ik een nieuwe taal leer. Of course, learning a new language could be very helpful in a professional setting. If you are applying for a new job or looking to get a promotion, being bilingual may be the advantage that gets you that position. Babbel is much easier and way less expensive than taking a course to learn a new language. Babbel is also incredibly effective. According to university studies, 15 hours of Babbel equals a semester of college Spanish. Right now, Babbel has an amazing offer for criminally listed viewers. If you click on the link in the description box below this video, you can save up to 65%. This is a fantastic deal, and it's only for a limited time, so I highly recommend checking it out today. By checking out Babbel, you can learn a new language, and you'll also be supporting Criminally Listed. Number 3. Alain Bouzeida. Just before 8 p.m. on Friday, February 27, 1987, there were about 50 people in the Bastille station of the Paris Metro. 37-year-old Alain Bouzeida, who was described as a vagabond and a tramp, was in the station. He was intoxicated and he was harassing people. At some point, he started yelling at a group of people who were standing on the platform across the tracks from him. He specifically targeted a man who was about 25 years old. The man was tall with short hair and he was wearing a nice suit. The man was also carrying a briefcase. After being cursed at, the man put his briefcase down on a bench and he opened it. He pulled a machete out of the briefcase. He dropped down on the track, crossed the rails, and climbed up on the other side of the platform. He calmly walked up to Bouzeida and whacked him in the neck with the machete. The injury was gruesome. Then the man crossed back to the platform where he had been standing and put the bloody machete back into his briefcase. Then he did what was described as an ironic hand gesture to the shocked onlookers. He then boarded the next train and he was transported out of the station. 37-year-old Alain Bouzeida was later pronounced dead. Despite dozens of people witnessing the murder, the mysterious machete-wielding man in the suit has never been identified, and the murder is considered cold. Number 2. Eddie Politelli. Mamma Mia Pizza was a pizza shop in Stevenson Ranch, California. Stevenson Ranch is an affluent, census-designated place in the Santa Clarita Valley. Mamma Mia Pizza was a popular place for people to get a New York-style slice of pizza. In June 2006, 72-year-old Eddie Politelli was a volunteer cook at the restaurant. Politelli was a native of Rhode Island, and he came from a family of law enforcement. Politelli never worked in law enforcement himself. Instead, Politelli, who was self-taught, cooked for many years at a members-only club. Then for several years, he owned and operated his own restaurant. Politelli had a passion for cooking because he loved how his food brought smiles to people's faces. Another one of his passions was music. He played drums in several jazz bands. Politelli was married, but in the 1980s, he and his wife got divorced. After the divorce, he moved to California. In 2000, Politelli's only child, a son, died after a battle with cancer. After that, Politelli got a dog, and they were inseparable. In June 2006, Politelli and his dog lived in Canyon Country, which is a suburb in Santa Clarita. Politelli had a granddaughter who lived in Texas. Politelli's friends and family called him a sweet man who was also a lot of fun. But Politelli did have his secrets. For example, he was missing his right index finger, and no one knows how he lost it. The only thing he would say about it was that he lost it when he was 25 years old. In June 2006, Mamma Mia's Pizza didn't open till 11 a.m., but Politelli usually arrived hours earlier to make the pizza sauce. That is what he did on June 12, 2006. At 8:10 a.m., a delivery man dropped off some produce. The delivery man stayed and drank coffee with Politelli for a few minutes, and then he left. Shortly after he left, a man came in through the unlocked back door. The man led Politelli through the kitchen, through the back room, and out the back door to an alley behind the restaurant. Just before 8:30 p.m., the owner of the pizza shop, Anthony Sposato, arrived at the shop. When he got into the kitchen, he noticed that the back door was open. He heard Politelli pleading with the man in the back alley. Politelli was saying, "Don't hurt me, I don't have anything." Sposato didn't know what was happening, but he didn't want to walk into a dangerous situation. So he went out the front door and ran to the alley by going around the building. When Sposato got to the alley, he saw a man with a gun in his left hand and an 18-inch machete in the right hand standing with Politelli. Politelli saw Sposato and he shouted, "Tony, help me, he has a gun." Then Politelli tried to run. But Politelli had previously undergone 2 surgeries on his hips, so he didn't move quickly. The armed man caught the 72-year-old man by the back of the shirt. He pulled him back and pushed him to the ground. He then started attacking Politelli with the machete. Sposato ran to a construction truck that was parked nearby. He told the workers to call 911 and he grabbed a shovel. When Sposato got back to the alley, he told the attacker to stop and started banging the shovel on the ground. But the man continued to attack Politelli. When the attacker was finished, he walked down the alley out to the road and got into a silver Dodge Magnum station wagon and he drove off. Unfortunately, by the time first responders arrived, it was too late to help 72-year-old Eddie Politelli. He had been stabbed in the left side of the chest, the lower abdomen, the chest bone, and in the solar plexus. He also had cuts on his left ear and his lower back. His right hand had defensive wounds. He lost about a quarter of all the blood in his body. The police were at a loss to the motive. When the killer came into the restaurant, it appeared he made no attempts to steal anything. Also, why would the killer force Politelli into the alley if it was robbery? Politelli was a 72-year-old man with mobility issues, so it would have been easy for the killer to push him down and take anything he wanted. Something else that the police couldn't figure out is why would the killer attack him with a machete instead of shooting him? In the alley, the police found a cardboard box that contained the machete. Based on the box, the murder weapon was a Nicholson 18-inch machete. The police also found several clear plastic bags. The police were asked if Politelli's murder was connected to organized crime. They said that they had received several tips concerning organized crime and they had not ruled out that possibility. This sketch was developed based on eyewitness accounts. The killer was described as a white or light-skinned Hispanic man in his late 20s. He was clean-shaven and he had dark hair. He was about 5'7" and weighed around 160 pounds. At the time of the murder, he was wearing a white t-shirt, a black hoodie, and blue jeans. He was also carrying a backpack over one of his shoulders. If the killer is still alive today, he would approximately be in his mid-40s. A man was recorded on a camera at a restaurant next door to Mamma Mia's. However, the footage isn't clear and you cannot see the man's face. Only these stills have been released. The police believe that this figure may be the killer. The friends and family of Eddie Politelli are hoping that the case will be solved soon. After 15 years, the police want to close what they consider to be the grisliest unsolved murder in the Santa Clarita Valley. Number 1. Jodi Cooper. Carywood is an unincorporated community in northern Idaho. It is home to only a few hundred people. In early 1992, Jodi Cooper lived there with her common-law husband, 41-year-old Robert Crockett, who went by the name Pete. Also living with them was Jodi's son from a previous marriage, 17-year-old Jeremy Cooper, and the son she had with Pete, 8-year-old Kenneth Crockett. They lived in an isolated house that was surrounded by pine trees. Jodi worked as a college nursing instructor. 1992 was a leap year. 2 hours into February 29, 1992, there was a brutal attack in the master bedroom of the family's home. 41-year-old Pete Crockett, who was seriously injured but conscious, came into the room of his son, Kenneth. Pete had been hacked, slashed, and stabbed several times. Kenneth, who was unharmed, helped his father out of the house. Pete and Kenneth made their way to a neighbor's home that was about 1,000 feet from their own home. The neighbors called the police. First responders rushed to the area. Pete was taken to the hospital and he ultimately survived. He had broken bones in both arms and a fractured skull. The master bedroom was bathed in blood. On the bed was 41-year-old Jodi Cooper, who was clearly dead. She had suffered 23 wounds. Her hands were nearly severed. It is believed that she put up her hands to try to defend herself. It was initially thought that the murder weapon was an axe or a hatchet, but the medical examiner said that the weapon was a long, thin-bladed instrument, most likely a machete. Notably absent from the house that morning was Jodi's 17-year-old son, Jeremy. About an hour after the murder, the police found Jeremy walking down the road towards his home. He was immediately picked up and brought to the police station and then questioned regarding his whereabouts for the time of the attack. Jeremy did not have a clear alibi. He said he had snuck out of the house to meet up with a pair of friends. The police talked to one of his friends, 18-year-old Jason Dettell, and Dettell said he had no idea Jeremy was planning on meeting up with him. Dettell did say that he was out driving that morning and he came across Jeremy, who was walking beside the highway. He picked him up and drove him part of the way home. The police checked the clothes that Jeremy was wearing. On his black jeans, they found 2 nickel-sized blood stains. They checked his glasses and discovered a blood smear that was not visible to the naked eye. At the crime scene, the forensic expert found a bloody fingerprint on the door leading out of the house. It turned out that the print came from Jeremy's right ring finger. So hours after the attack, Jeremy was arrested. The police continued to question the friend who Jeremy was supposed to meet that night, Jason Dettell. Dittel told the police that Jeremy hated his parents and he talked about getting rid of them. Dittel said that he kept a machete in his pickup truck, but it had been missing since the murder. He said that it was possible that Jeremy put the machete in his backpack the day before the attack. Forensic evidence backed up the theory that Dittel's machete was the murder weapon. Flecks of black paint were found in Jodi's wounds and in a wall that had been struck with the murder weapon. Dittel had used black spray paint to paint the machete black. As 17-year-old Jeremy Cooper was being held in the county jail, the case against him fell apart. There was no disputing that Jeremy's bloody fingerprint was found on the door. It was the fingerprint from his right ring finger. The problem was that the fingerprint wasn't visible to the naked eye. It was only found after it was sprayed with a chemical that reacts to protein in blood. The police could not tell when the bloody fingerprint was put there, and it could have been there for over a year. Another problem is that on the night of the murder, Jeremy had cut his right ring finger. So he could have left the print there earlier that night and cleaned it up. The police had no way to tell whose blood it was, or if it was even human or animal blood. Then there was the blood smudge on the lens of Jeremy's glasses. It also wasn't visible to the naked eye. A DNA test was performed on the smudge. It turned out to be Jeremy's blood. The two small blood stains on his pants were tested, and the results were inconclusive. Jeremy's lawyer pointed out that the murder was a bloodbath. The killer definitely would have been covered in blood. Ergo, if Jeremy had been the killer, they would have found a lot more blood on him than two small stains on his pants. Another problem was motive. Jeremy admitted that he and his stepfather did not get along. He said they were like two strangers who lived in the same house. But he loved his mother and he had no reason to kill her. He also didn't despise his stepfather enough to kill him. Also, no other evidence connected Jeremy to the murder. Pete Crockett couldn't remember much about the attack, and he did not get a good look at the assailant. The murder weapon was never found. Jeremy didn't have a criminal record, a history of disciplinary problems, or any known mental health problems. Since there was absolutely no evidence connecting Jeremy to the murder, 6 months after he was arrested, in September 1992, Jeremy's lawyer went to the Idaho Supreme Court. He argued that Jeremy was being unlawfully imprisoned. A month later, after spending 261 days in jail, Jeremy was released on a $25,000 bail. During his time in jail, Jeremy turned 18 and he missed his high school graduation. After being released on bail, Jeremy moved to Las Vegas, Nevada to live with his paternal grandparents. The charges against him were eventually dismissed, but they could have been refiled at any time. Pete Crockett said that after Jeremy was released, he was afraid for his own safety and the safety of his son. Jeremy was asked if he knew who killed his mother, and he said he had theories, but he wouldn't elaborate. He also said he wasn't worried about being charged again because they wouldn't find any evidence that connected him to the murder because he didn't have anything to do with the murder. Jeremy's father believes he was set up. Jeremy's lawyer said that the police ignored evidence that implicated other people. He hired a private investigator, and the private investigator looked in Jason Dittel's truck, and he found blood. The police never searched Dittel's truck or tested the blood. The morning of the murder, Jeremy was supposed to meet up with two friends, and one of them was Dittel. The other friend was a young man named Corey Stark. In Stark's vehicle, a bloody rag was found. After it was found, Stark disappeared from the area. He reappeared months later, and he eventually gave a sample of his DNA. But the results of those tests are unknown. Jeremy's lawyer did not accuse Littell and Stark of being involved in the murder, but he pointed out that the police ignored other potential evidence because they were solely focused on Jeremy. It's been over 19 years since the murder of Jodi Cooper, and no other arrests have been made. In 2019, a sheriff's deputy said progress has been made in the case. The deputy said that many people thought that the murder might be related to the fact that Pete Crockett was growing marijuana. But the deputy said that they do not think that the attack was drug-related. He said that they have gone back and interviewed people who were persons of interest. He said that some of their stories were inconsistent with what they said back in 1992. He said that it doesn't necessarily make them guilty because they could just have a bad memory. But he said that these inconsistencies were worth exploring. The friends and family of Jodi Cooper are hoping that one day soon, the police will finally close the case. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please check out the latest episode of our podcast, Into the Killing. In this week's episode, we look at a bizarre mass murder that happened in 2003. The only thing more shocking than the massacre is how it was solved. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere you find great podcasts. Well, that's all for today. Thank you again for watching.